I'm going to tell you a story of a kid who no one believed it to be true, yet in the end, sadly, it was. It was 2016 in an old rundown home. A 10-year-old boy by the name of Cyrus Murdock, who was just getting home from school, nothing unusual, just another day, another lesson learned. When he returned home, he had noticed that both of his parents had been home. Normally when he came home, no one was there, so to him, this was pretty unusual. Yet, he didn't think anything of it, his heart full of joy and love, besides all the torment his own parents had put him through. He knocked on the door, noticing it was locked. Minutes passed. There was no answer. Another knock. Minutes passed. No answer. Eventually, he thought maybe they were asleep. Doing what he normally did when the door was locked, he went through an unlocked window, not noticing anything out of the ordinary at first, until he smelt a foul stench. Something he couldn't put his finger on, yet the scent he was smelling was flesh and blood. He followed the horrific smell, only to find two cannibals eating on his parents' dead, bloody, torn-up corpses. He couldn't scream, he couldn't move. He was petrified. One of them approached him. Neither of them talked. They forced him down on his parents' dead corpses, now laying in his dead guardian's blood. He was mortified. One of the cannibals held him down, forcing his mouth open. He was crying, yet he couldn't make any noise. They forced the meat of his mother's throat into his mouth, one cannibal forcing him to chew it, then holding his nose, making him eat his own mother. Something clicked inside of him during this moment. Suddenly, his pupils dilated, going smaller and smaller, turning into basically a savage. Yet, the cannibals knocked him out before anything could happen. They kidnapped him, taking him to their home, adopting him into their quote-unquote family. It was just him and the two cannibals. No one else except the corpses that were rotting away. He was forced into cannibalism by the two. 6 years had passed. The police had been on a search for the missing boy. They thought the case had ran cold until they got an anonymous call to that house he was held in. Someone called saying they could smell something rotten from the outside when they passed it. The cop showed up, finding the now 16-year-old boy sitting in the middle of the house. Now the two cannibals lay dead at his knees. He held their hearts in his hand, laughing silently while tears streamed down his face. He had completely lost it. He saw the police, yet he couldn't move. He couldn't react. To him, those two cannibals raised him to be who he was, and he murdered them both. He killed the two that he thought showed him love. The police noticed this boy. Realizing it was the missing kid, they immediately called it in. They didn't have to fight him much. He was in such a stone daze from killing, he couldn't move. They took him to an asylum to be treated, yet it wasn't how everyone thought it would go. You know the stories, the doctors mistreating the patients, doing horrific things to them. Well, these doctors were no different. When Cyrus first arrived, he had a raspy, scratchy, and savage voice. The doctors often would try to change his voice by shocking him in the throat, thinking that would change. Yet, only made it worse. Eventually, during a checkup, Cyrus was able to break free from the restraints that held him down. He had an awfully sharp canine teeth for a human. Lunging on to the doctors, he lashed out, sinking his teeth into the doctor's neck as deep as he could, ripping out his jugular and killing the doctor. He had to be sedated. You know how the story goes in these hospitals. They decide to take drastic measures. Well, they did. They sewed a dog muzzle into his face, trying to keep him from biting anyone else. Yet that wasn't the end of his punishment. No, there was much more. This punishment led to the doctor's worst mistake. They chained him up outside onto a metal pole with metal chains. It began to storm, thundering, cracking, lightning striking all around. Cyrus was terrified. He knew what would soon happen, wondering if his fate was now sealed. Yet, when the lightning struck down onto the pole, it struck only his muzzle and then the chains. Yet, when it hit his muzzle, it caused him to have severe lightning scars across his face and down his neck, burning his eyes, and the skin around slowly turned black. He didn't go blind. Instead, he went insane. Completely insane. The chains that were hit by the lightning had melted, causing his escape to be easy. Or so he thought. He ran off into the woods, ripping the muzzle off with all the strength he had left. Soon enough, collapsing onto the ground, barely being able to move, he stayed there to rest. The hospital never went to look for him. They assumed he died, yet he was laying in the woods. Soon he gained consciousness again. His face bleeding severely, he ripped some of his undershirt off, wrapping it around his face like a bandage, taking some clothespins out of his pockets that he always carried to keep the ripped piece of shirt together on his face. He ran off deep into